Good evening again, everyone. Welcome to I2E2, which stands for Ignite, Inspire, Educate, and Engage. Today, you will have a series of discussions and also followed by a question and answer session. For the duration of the discussion, we will have the Q&A function open. So if you have questions that you may want to pose to our panelists, please go ahead and type those in. And when we get to the question and answer portion, we will address those in order. They will be answered verbally, or I may also type some responses. We would like to thank our friends in the Mitchell West Center for Social Inclusion for being the co-sponsors of this series. I'd like to also thank our School of the Arts team members, Ms. Vanessa Borelli-Vega, Ms. Monica Collier, Ms. Megan Merciers, and also our Norton support staff as well. As I mentioned earlier, today's discussion will contain a 50 to 60-minute discussion, and then also followed by about a 20 to 30-minute question and answer session. My expectations are to share quality material in a quality manner. Use poetry as a way to shed light on some things I feel to be discussed, that need to be discussed in this country. Those are the words of Mr. Ed Mabry. His role as an artist, creator, and entrepreneur has placed him as a staple in the world of creative expression. It should also be noted that he was the first person of color to win the individual World Poetry Slam Championship. His leading of today's discussion, Meet the New Creative Professional, will address the obstacles each professional on this panel has to overcome in their artistic careers and how they begin the process of that overcoming them against a system where the odds are stacked against them. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Ed Mabry.
Hello to everybody out there. We thank you so much for being a part of this event, a groundbreaking event at that, and we're going to kind of jump right into it. We have two other wonderful panel members here with me today, and we're going to start basically kind of having a talk. It's going to sound kind of formal, but not really. So feel free, as you have your questions, start generating them sooner than later. You don't have to wait till the end of everything to have them. Go ahead and get those ready, and whatever you want to discuss and talk about, we're going to be ready for that. And the moderators will make sure to handle that as well. So first off, thank you for UNA for making this happen. Of course, for Mrs. Borelli and everyone else involved, and of course, Dr. Terrance as well. This is very important work and conversations that they've set up for us to have here as part of I2E2, and we couldn't be more honored to be a part of it. So first, let me go ahead and get into introducing who is joining me on this talk. And they're all creative professionals, all artists. We'll go in reverse order. Well, not reverse order, go in this order. Mr. Edward Wilson. Stage name is Obbie West. He is a native of Los Angeles, California, retiree from the United States Army. Aside from serving his country, he's also an international spoken word artist, an advocate and the author of a poetry book entitled Blossom. Obbie's life began with poetry in 2011 in Killeen, Texas, under the tutoring of the Killeen Poetry Slam there, and has thrived ever since. I'm going to skip some parts of his bio because there's a huge part is I want to make sure that he discusses and shares who he is with you as well. But some key things in that, Obbie West, aka Edward Wilson, is an artist. He's a creative professional. He is a man of integrity and honor. He's a father. Trying to think of everything else. He's a vet from the military. He also discusses he's a mental advocate and sexual health and sexual awareness advocate as well, and does a lot of work in a variety of communities, not just where he lives, but he's done them nationally. I don't think I've ever seen him in the same place twice, and every place he's always leaving from some talk, seminar, lecture, performance. His performances become lectures, his lectures become performances. So we're very, very honored to have him here with us today. Then we also have Mr. Darendra Wolfe. Miss Wolfe is a native of South Carolina, deep east southeast coast. I should be more specific, Carolina, just a stone throw away from Myrtle Beach. She is also an Army vet. She also has attended college as well. She is a mother of two wonderful children, a boy and a girl. She has spent the majority of her lifetime in the South Carolina area. and in turn also is a business owner and also does freelance work, working with other businesses. So she owns her own company, and in addition to that, she also freelances or is subcontracted out with others as well. Somehow in the midst of all that, she also still finds time to remain active enough to help educate others. She's a tutor professionally on the collegiate level, if you can believe that or not, considering how young she is. So two very, very incredible, dynamic, and highly qualified individuals to be part of this talk today. So with that being said, my name is Ed Mabry. My bio is totally irrelevant, but I'm very honored to be here and be chairing this panel right now. We're going to go ahead and have both of them come on screen for us, and we're going to get this talk started. Thank you so much both for coming out and be a part of this. I'm going to make sure that my background noise is next to nothing. So when you start talking, it should switch over to your screen. And just to make it more fun, we have 4 big things we want to discuss in this one. And the other ones we're going to save for the 18th, which I strongly encourage everyone to come out for as well. So for today, let's make it more interesting. We have 4 different topics. Obbie, pick a number between 1 and 4, please.
4.
4 it is. So we're going to start out of order. I thought about doing it in order, but I figured it's more fun to go out of order. So 4. Here's where we're going to start for today. How do you operate? And keep in mind, I guess everyone that's going to be tuning into this now or later, another fraction or a faction of this talk is we're doing it from a BIPOC point of view. That's Black, Indigenous, people of color. The people that you're seeing speak to you today, to the best of my knowledge, because I double checked with them before this, all identify as Black in that acronym. So 3 Black people, because we're all people of color, but we're actually Black people. So 3 Black people that are creative professionals. So everything that's being discussed is being discussed from that point of view. If something bothers or triggers you, we want to apologize, but we're not going to. The bigger thing would be to discuss in the question part why it may bother or trigger you, and we can maybe get to the bottom of that and discuss it from a more bigger vantage point. And maybe we all can grow and learn from it, because this is a learning opportunity for us as well as for you. So we're learning as much as we're sharing and teaching. So 4 is, how do you operate and succeed when the system is built against you? How do you operate? How, when in a situation as Obbie West had to operate and in turn still succeeded when the system he was navigating was built against him?
4, that's excuse me if I keep looking to the side. I want to make sure I don't go over my time, but that answer has layers. So when we talk about the system, if the system was spoken word, I really don't see so much of a problem there, because spoken word has been attached to Black people since the origin of it. So I'm kind of right where I'm supposed to be. If they kind of redlined art, this is where they'd place me, right? But if I tried to buy property in rock and roll, then I may have a problem. So I really don't see a problem in the space as a spoken word artist. I feel like I'm right where where people expect me to be, spoken word or rap, something along those lines. Now, when you talk about in general, a system in general, as a Black man, I have an inherent level of insecurity. I feel unsafe, right? If you standing on a sidewalk and you step out into the street, the crosswalk is for you, the light is green for you, you have the right of way, and you step out into the street, and even though you're right, a car smashes into you and you end up in a hospital within an inch of your life. I guarantee you, when you recover, next time you step out into the street, you're going to be absolutely hesitant. You're going to look at each driver that's coming as if they can't drive until they prove themselves otherwise. That's what our history has done to me. So anybody that's not my color, I look at them as if they can't drive until they prove otherwise, because I have an inherent level of insecurity. So there's always a challenge within that. But with that challenge, it's kind of like anything else. This is the world that I live in. It's not the city I live in, so I can't move to another city. It's the world I live in. So it's either this or die, right? And I choose to live. So it's resilience. It's absolute resilience. It's me knowing that I have no other option but to be successful in this. So I think it's very important that whenever you're doing something, you work as hard as you can to make yourself undeniable in that lane. I was reading a book called The Art of Seduction, and they had this speaker, dynamic speaker. People didn't see him, but they heard of him. So they hired this guy to come to their town. It was the first time they could lay eyes on him. And when he came onto the stage, the way he was dressed was absolutely hilarious. So they lost all respect for him instantly because of the way he was dressed. But the second he opened his mouth, what he had on became irrelevant, and everything he said became the most important thing they ever heard. So when you make yourself undeniable in your lane, everything else has a chance of becoming irrelevant. Even if it doesn't become irrelevant, most people will accept it in order for them to reap the benefits of your presence. That's the reason why you have situations like Robert Kelly. When his music stopped selling is when the problems came. But when he was undeniable in his lane, the things that he did was just flown by the wayside because we needed to keep him to benefit from his presence. So I try to do what I can to make myself undeniable in my lane. Is another way I try to succeed whenever it's against me. And I'm an advocate for sexual assault and harassment. So the odds are stacked against me in that dynamic as well because I'm a male. And society says the male is the abuser and the woman is the victim. So I'm the one that's going through the streets with dragon breath and burning up the streets. So how does Godzilla not look hypocritical when he starts talking about fire safety? Right. So automatically that's against me. When I stand in front of a group of people, as a man, I have to prove that I'm not just doing this for a check. So I make sure that everything I do is with sincere authenticity. I make sure what I do is fearless. If ever you're scared, then I think a black person fear is more detrimental to a black person than anything else because there's more threats around us than anyone else. So if we're dominated by fear, it's inevitable that we won't succeed unless we use that fear in a way that pushes us forward. So I make sure that what I do it fearlessly. I don't ask for permission. I just make sure that it's genuine and that it's right and that I absolutely believe in it. So I hope I didn't go off on a tangent that addressed the question.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Ms. Wolfe, present the same question to you. How do you operate and succeed when the system is built against you?
Okay, well, I don't know if I have anything as insightful as what Obbie said, but for me, the way that I operate in a system that's built against me, a wise man once told me that you follow the rules until you are in a position to break them and change them. And so for me, it's more along those lines. My guidance through the structure is based spiritually. So in a system that's built against me, I found my grounding in God, and I put my faith in that. And when you have faith in something that is bigger than you, you have no choice but to not fear, or fear takes a backseat, or you have something else to put um, the weight of your worry on. So I don't, as a black woman, as a woman, as a black woman living in America, I know I should look at all of the things that are stacked against me and I say, oh my gosh, this glass ceiling is impossible to break through. But instead, I look around me and I figure out how many people I'm going to take with me to break this ceiling. I don't feel bound by any type of systemic situation because I know I'm stronger than anything. Um, Anything that this country could throw at me, anything that this society could throw at me, this whole civilization, as a matter of fact, was built on my back and the backs of my ancestors. So I don't have any, I don't have any, I guess, connection with that whole. It's built against me. It's not. I'm here to break it.
Awesome, thank you. Get a number in your head between 1 and 3 while I go ahead and answer this. Just to make sure touching myself, how do you operate and succeed when the system is built against you? In terms of being a creative professional with my history and my background specifically, there are times where the system's intrinsic have, of course, systemic racism is built in. That's almost a byproduct. And as a Black person in the arts and in corporate world, you actually have to experience it in order to know what it is. The definition itself, like we experienced microaggressions before we knew the word microaggression. And I think I could probably speak for both other panel members. Like you experienced it, you didn't know what it was. You didn't know what the tension or stress, et cetera, was until someone gave it a word. And you're like, oh, that's what's been happening to me. Same thing with the systemic oppression. It's not always, it's the subtleties that become a bigger thing. The blatant things you can almost, not that you should have to deal with, but you can. So the best way I've learned to operate within those things is to, you have to find a way, you have to balance the way of saying these things can potentially happen. There are people within this system that can potentially harm me in this fashion, but nothing involving those things is going to stop my progression. And it doesn't mean that you should get applause for it and they should be given carte blanche to treat you any kind of way just because you're going to be quote unquote strong enough to push through it. That's one of the forms of systemic oppression, is that Black people, Black artists, Black creatives can handle it. That goes all the way back to the Chuck Berrys, the Little Richards, the James Browns, those who had their music stolen from them during the British explosion, of course. And when they came over singing the same songs, all of a sudden it was accepted when race records were still a thing. You had those same people singing the race record songs and making them hits, while the people who were the originators of those songs and of that music sat at home and went dead broke. So it's definitely, we don't need any more credit for being strong and resilient. A way to succeed through it, another option is, or another variance is to kind of plan for it, unfortunately. I think Obbie said very well, when you head out into the street now, the second time around, you'd be a little nervous. So then you would factor, to use to extend his metaphor, you would factor that nervousness into your travels. You would factor that I may be going to wait a light or two before crossing the street. Let me get a feel. Let me see someone else cross the street to make sure everything's okay. Let me time it. Let me wait till the street is clear. And those metaphors just simply turn into giving yourself as an artist or as a creative professional the opportunity to oftentimes blaze paths, but also see how those before you have already done it. And the difference, I believe, between being artistic and being an artist or creative professional is that you learn how to apply what someone has done in a different lane than yours into your lane. So I can take the maneuverings of, say, a Sean Carter, aka Jay-Z, and I can apply them to poetry. I can apply them to other businesses because I've seen, he's shown us how he's navigated certain things. Well, if he's made it through those ways, it's less resistance for me to push through those ways if I take his lessons and apply them to my particular lane or my particular field. I think comedians do it all the time with everything they do. They've seen other comedians go forward. They watch them. They see how to navigate a room. The biggest thing they tell you is how to read a room. Miss Wolfe and Mr. West have both had to read rooms during their times of performing as spoken word artists. You start a poem, immediately realize this is not the poem for this space. And you find out real quick. However, what you cannot ever do is go, I'm sorry, you don't like this poem, I'm gonna stop and do another one. You push on through it. But as you're pushing through it, you even can learn how to deliver it differently, to how they'll receive the message while you're still delivering it. Maybe you don't yell it, maybe you whisper, maybe you say it with a smile, maybe you say it forcefully, you change up what you're doing, and all of a sudden they receive that message differently, while at the same time you're still in your head planning the next thing you're going to share. Or if it's a matter of, well, I'm going to share what I was going to share anyway, you're still kind of working and making slight, tiny, minute adjustments that they never notice if you're doing your job right. And all of a sudden they receive it, like he mentioned with the individual coming out dressed a certain way, that was the opposite of the message they were sharing in their book. That was an intentional thing. So we oftentimes learn how to navigate and do those things within ourselves. Ms. Wolfe, give me a number between 1 and 3.
2. Can you
2 it is. Can hear you some. If the sound could be up a little bit, it'd be awesome, but just your mic sound, not necessarily your speaker sound. But I hear you clearly, just could be up, do up a little bit, that'd be awesome. Matter of fact, we'll give you 1 second to work on that. What's going to go back and forth, but we'll start back with Obbie. Just give her a second to work on the microphone. 2 is, how did you grow your art as a Black indigenous person of color? So how did you grow your art as a Black person? Obbie West.
Very interesting question. This is another question that the answer comes in layers. One, with perspective. I'm a firm believer that information information and knowledge can be useless if it's absent of perspective, right? Once you get information and then you add perspective to the information, at that point it becomes wisdom. So if you know something, but you only know how to use that thing in one way, then you will never really maximize the use of that thing. So within poetry, I try to, I'm a person of perspective. I try to lend a lot of perspective. I talk about things that most people who are listening are already aware of, but talk about it in a different light, a way that they may not have considered. Now they have the information and they can use that information, apply it in different ways versus before they only knew one way to use that information. So perspective is huge for me. To give an example of that, I was watching some crime TV. I'm a crime TV buff, and there was a guy who was being on trial for murder. He was on trial for murder, and he had a neighbor. He told his neighbor, "Hey, I just killed somebody," and he showed his neighbor the body in the room. So it didn't sit well with his neighbor. A few months later, his neighbor went and told. So now his neighbor becomes a witness during the trial. And the defense attorney, he tries to discredit the neighbor or the witness by saying, "So you mean to tell me that this guy told you he killed somebody and he showed you the body and he stays 5 feet away from you and you still went in your house and you went to sleep that night and you didn't leave and go nowhere else, you didn't go to the police for help?" And this made the jury think that the guy was lying because he reacted in this way. But where I'm from, if somebody tells you about a murder and you do anything outside of your normal routine that may seem like you're going to the police, you'll probably be the next one dead. So it's your best bet just to go in your house and go to sleep the same way you would in any other day. But without that perspective, this guy's credibility was on the line. So to take something that's common knowledge and show people a different way that that thing shows up is a huge part of my poetry. The second part of it is, which I mentioned before, fearlessness. I'm an advocate, and sexual assault and harassment, domestic violence aren't popular topics. So I have to have the courage to talk about something that's not popular in front of an audience of people who are waiting to hear what I have to say. And in order to do that, you have to absolutely be fearless. Anything that goes unmentioned goes unaddressed, which is the reason communication is so important within relationships. Because if it goes unmentioned, it goes unaddressed. So in order for me to address these things that are important to me, I absolutely have to be fearless. So between perspective and fearlessness is how I grow my art as a Black man.
Awesome. With that, before you go away, Obbie, I want to ask this as a follow-up. So from the perspective of the fearlessness, et cetera, when you grow it, because you didn't start off your spoken word career with those two things being your foundation in terms of speaking about them strictly. So how did you go from what you were doing into that? Because to go just being a poet, being a spoken word artist, and being a paid professional at doing so is a really big thing. And then to say, hey, I'm going to focus on these two niche markets or these two avenues. What spawned or spurned that? What caused that transition to make you kind of start shifting that focus?
Okay, another two-part answer. One was the audience, the community of poetry. If you compare a comedy audience to a poetry audience, you'll notice one is way more kind than the other. In poetry, you have an obligation to be good. I mean, in comedy, you have an obligation to be good, or you might get booed off the stage. In poetry, there's like an inherent appreciation. Even if they don't know what you were talking about, they just applaud the bravery. So that level of support allowed me to grow more comfortable in sharing perspective that I knew wouldn't be popular, or in being fearless. The other part of that is internal. After I started doing poetry, it absolutely became my voice box. I can't even tell you what I used my voice for before 2010. So when I started doing poetry, it absolutely became liberation for me. So everything that got in the way of that felt like a restraint. Even a mic stand, standing in front of a mic stand where I'm restricted to this one spot felt like a restraint. So I went out and bought a headset so I can move around the stage. So now if you take a topic that I want to address, but I'm afraid to address this topic because of what the potential response may be, I'm feeling encaged. And the imprisonment is self-imposed. So it's very difficult to sleep with that. So in order for me to feel that level of freedom that I gravitated to poetry for, I had no choice but to talk about those things that needed to be addressed. So the combination of the generosity that comes with a poetry crowd and the absolute need for liberation, those helped me to grow into a space to where I was able to broadcast an unpopular perspective and be fearless in what I talk about. I hope I addressed the question.
Yes, yes, thank you. Ms. Wolfe, thank you for coming back with us. Hope everything's okay. Same thing. How did you grow your art as a Black, specifically, how did you grow your art as a Black woman?
There are actually four ways that I grew my art. Being a Black woman, first of all, is experience. So no one else can have my personal experience. You can't walk in my shoes. You can't put on my skin. You can't wear my hair. You can't, take the comments that come at you from people who are not, who do look like you or who don't look like you. So the first way that I grew my art as a Black woman is experience. Like I said, no one cooks like we do. No one speaks like we do. No one moves like we do. So that's the Black woman is an art form in herself. So since no one can be that, I have to live it. Experience. The second thing, as Mr. West was speaking about, is perspective. Not only giving mine, but being willing to listen to someone else's. And that also means hearing perspectives from people who look just like me sometimes. Because often Black people get it confused that just because you see two Black women together, our experiences are the same. But we go through different things in different ways. When we experience colorism different, we experience racism different, we experience misogyny different. So getting those perspectives, and not just from women, Black women or women of color, but other women as well, LGTB, transgender, white women, getting all of those different perspectives and understanding that sometimes we have more in common than we have in differences. The third thing is research. Once you get perspective as a Black woman, once you get a man's perspective, get another woman's perspective, get another culture's perspective, it's important for me to research that myself and find out the truth for myself. You can hear somebody else's personal story all day long, but if you don't take the opportunity to learn about it in depth, and not just by word of mouth or by somebody else is telling you about it, then you don't know the truth for yourself. And so when you begin to understand the truth for yourself, you can't hear me.
We hear you, just project more if you can. And once we go to the next question, we'll give you some more time to work on that. But keep going, please.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, I forgot where I was. Research. You research other people's perspectives, and that in turn helps you gain more experience in understanding how to help people, how to serve people better, how to reach them with your words, and not just reach them with your words, but reach them with your art. How to reach them, and meet people right where they are. Yeah. I'm going to try to go fix this. I'm so sorry, guys.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We just sent you a message forward about the sound, so you'll be able to get that taken care of. Awesome. And I will, I guess, tackle this question myself real quick. So how do you grow your art as a Black person, as a Black male? One of the primary things in that, in terms of growing your art, or growing your art form, I guess I should say it differently. So growing your art is you keep working at your art. That's regardless of what your art form is. Growing it in terms of its reach is a very different thing. So growing it in terms of its reach is one, which I believe Obbie and Darendra both touched on, is being unapologetically yourself first. Second, being willing to be yourself in those other spaces. That's a bigger thing, is being willing to be yourself in those other spaces, rather than code switch, rather than kowtow, rather than try to adjust yourself for the space. One of the biggest things I learned when I did some theater was that the director would often say, come into the space and make it yours. When I first did theater, a director specifically said, get something from home, something very small, but something that means a lot to you from home, and bring it with you. And at one of the first rehearsals, they said, now put it on stage. and you put it on stage, and I'll leave it there. And it changed your perspective on the space, because now part of your home is now in that space. And what the director did was very smart. They would send people to walk towards a part of the stage where your precious thing was. And then in turn, you notice that someone, Obbie's getting way too close to my, whatever I put on stage, my glass from home, my favorite mug. And you notice it while you're still performing your part. Miss Wolfe will get too close. Dr. Brown will get too close. And what it did was it made you become naturally territorial. I hope I didn't bring this thing on this stage for so-and-so to tear up, mess up, break, etc. And what happened was now you're territorial about your thing being in that space. It became your home. And then they say, okay, now take that item back home and leave it there. And you start acting differently about the stage. The same thing more or less occurs with us, or definitely with me, in terms of operating within the arts, is that every space is my space. And that's from the boardroom to the stage. Every space is my space. It belongs to me. I will mark it in some shape, form, or fashion in my head or physically, tangibly, to make it mine. The maneuvering, they both discussed how you have to shift. There are things, being a 6 foot tall, obese black man with 3 feet of hair, that people assume certain things when you walk into a room, certain things you walk up on the stage. And navigating that or operating within those spaces in arts, I've made it a habit of starting to say the why not. It's become a huge thing. So the people out there, the big thing is ask your question, why not? The whole, if not you, then who? I apply that to the business aspect and also in the arts. So why not I sing in a poem? Why not do a poem that involves opera or speaking in Latin? Why not do something that involves dance and dance myself, rather than wait for someone else to do those things? I had written a piece not long ago, and it was a dance-oriented piece that required ballet, classical, ballet, interpretive dance, modern, and hip hop. And I initially wrote it for a friend of mine to do with me, where I would speak it off stage. And it was discussing what it meant to dance, or what it meant to perform, or what it meant to be an artist as a Black person. So I was the narrator, I was the voice of God. And this individual was actually a classically, professionally trained white male that I knew. His job was to actually perform the poem. I'd speak it, he'd perform it. And we did it, and it was rave reviews. It was really rave reviews. Everybody seemed to enjoy it. And I enjoyed doing the poem. The problem is, when I started going on my next tour, people asked for the poem. And I was like, well, he's not touring with me, so it's going to be a problem. And one place, the guy just said, well, why don't you do it? I was like, do both? Say, yeah, do both. Do the poem and, perform it. And what ended up happening was I did it, and I felt different about the piece. The response was very different. And people literally said, I've seen both, don't ever do it the other way again. And from that point forward, it became just me doing it. And I realized the why, because it required me to take ownership of the piece. It had been mine to begin with. So a way to operate is to, one, always take ownership of your art form, your business. Being an entrepreneur is a business thing, but it's also an artistic endeavor, because it's your thing. It's your thing you thought of. You made a unreal thing real, and now you're trying to make it live and breathe. That's literally what a creative professional is. We're going to go on to the next one. I believe we're getting, make sure our other panel member, then they're going to log off of their desktop, potentially log back in with their phone. And I'll pick the number this time, because I only have 2 numbers left. It's either 1 or 3. 1 or 3? No, 1. Let's do 1. Matter of fact, so Obbie, 1 is, what's your story?
My story. My name is Obbie West. I'm a poet. More precisely, a word Pisces, constantly fishing for vowels and consonants. I'm sort of like a word hoarder. I listen, I hear them, then I heard them like sheep, then warm to sleep under notebook sheets. LA in the 80s raised me. I'm a December baby with a winter mentality. As a child, as a minor, pockets was 3 flat like a C minor. My mama, she was Miss Make It Happen. She had a knack for making magic. Her wallet was like, why Lord? But the essentials were like, voila. The purse was famine, but she still managed to feed the family. Poverty was my step pops. My paternal pops was a preacher with a drug prior, a constant work in progress, a Mississippi refugee. Racism raced him out of there. He escaped the noose like the knot was loose, brought his country to Cali and conceived what you see in me. A hood boy, a South Central mascot, made it out with a record clean as a push broom. Now I can sweep through any room without a costume. So as aforementioned, my name is Obbie West, and who I am today pretty much consists of about 3 components. So I'll try to go through those things by the number so I don't start running off on a tangent. One, I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, where we were inundated with violence. It became the norm. And there was a code of the streets, or a law that was written by the streets that was more important than abiding by the judicial law. That's largely what has made me who I am today. The second part of that is I grew up in an abusive household. So there was violence inside the house and violence outside the house. At 17, in the absence of other options, I joined the United States Army. My mother signed a field trip slip. I left and I joined the Army, and I was going for 20 years and 9 months. Throughout the time I was in the Army, I had a couple combat operations. During those combat operations, there were situations that assured me that I probably wouldn't live for the duration of that tour. So as a result of that, I developed coping mechanisms that made me still be able to function knowing that this may be my last day. And at the same time, I developed ways to brace my family for that, what I felt was inevitable. So I disconnected, broke ties. If you don't hear from me, then when you can't hear from me, you really have nothing to get used to because you hadn't been hearing from me anyway. And this did a lot for my ability to connect. So 1, growing up in a poverty-stricken environment. 2, growing up in an abusive household. 3, my experiences as a soldier are the 3 things that pretty much developed me into who I am today. Halfway through my tour in the military, I learned about poetry. Perfect timing for me to take these 3 things that are bottled up inside of me and figure out a way to broadcast them or to get them out. So in a huge nutshell, that's who I am, and that's my story.
Thank you very much for that. We're going to do a quick test here. Miss Wolfe, are you up and ready?
Let's see. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yeah, to speak up some, I can hear you, but to speak up just a little bit.
Hello, world.
There we go.
Awesome. I apologize for my technical difficulties, but who am I? What's my story? That's the question, correct?
Yes, what's your story? Yes.
Okay. What's my story? It's really hard going after Mr. West for anything. So I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, but before anything, I'm a child of God. That's the beginning of my story. I'm born and raised here in a small town right outside of Myrtle Beach called Lower, South Carolina. You've never seen it. You won't be able to find it on a map, so don't even try to look for it. I joined the military when I was 17. No, I joined the military when I was 17 years old in an effort to help my parents. I didn't want any one of my parents to have to pay for my college. So I joined, even though I wanted to write and I wanted to create and I wanted to do all of these things. I joined the military, in an effort to hide and to pay for and to be independent. 2 years in, I had a child. So I never actually got to take that big field trip across the pond, as everybody put it. I got to stay stateside. So most of my 6 years that I did in the military was stateside. I became a medic. And along with going into the military, one of the things that it afforded me was the opportunity to attend college. So I signed up and went to Winston-Salem State University on the nursing track. Even though I knew that I wanted to write and I was a creative, And that was the path that I really wanted to do. Everything and everyone around me told me that that would not be the thing for me to follow and for me to do. So after a while, things became difficult dealing with having a child and actually being in the military and going to school. And so I had to move home closer to my family so that I could have help. It's when I got back down here to South Carolina that I tried to go to school again, and my child got cancer. It was at that time that I realized, I was like, you know, I've kind of been pushing against the grain here on everything. Like every opportunity that I've been given to be creative and to use my voice and to use my talents visually, use my photography skills or my videography skills or graphic design skills or anything that has allowed me to be creative, I've always pushed it to the side as, oh, this is what they told me would never make me money, would never take me anywhere, but it was my passion. And it wasn't until I found myself in a predicament where my hands were tied every which way, and the only thing I could do was create. The only thing I could do was teach others what I knew. APA, MLA, Chicago format, research, how to take that research and put it into to something digestible for people and not entertain them, edutain them, I guess. And I learned so many different things in that time. So when my daughter got sick, she got stage 5 cancer and her kidneys, and it was just a whole situation that actually brought me to my knees and actually brought me to God, and actually had me asking him, you know, what would you have me do? Where would you have me go? And that's when I actually took notice of all of the notebooks of poetry and all of the stories, all of the writings. And that is when I started actually taking those things and telling stories, telling visual stories and helping others tell their visual stories and being of service to others. So in a nutshell, as Mr. West would say, my story is I'm a child of God first, I'm a mother second, and I'm a servant third.
Thank you a million times over for that. I can't compete with either one of their stories. I'm just going to tell my part, and we keep that simple. My name is Ed Mabry. My story is, I just want to point out to everybody watching this, it is very hard for me not to quote Steve Martin in The Jerk. I'm trying my best not to quote Steve Martin from The Jerk. So forgive me for that, because I really just want to say I was born a poor Black child in Mississippi, but that would not be true. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, raised in Dayton, Ohio, at a time when the public school system was pretty much trash there. My story as an artist has been that I grew up in a small town in Ohio that was small then and has shrunk since then, in terms of being a place that kind of time forgot and everybody gave up on. I was into poetry and speech as a kid. I was blessed enough to be born just before hip hop became a thing. So poetry was great. Then hip hop came along and it instantly became, we didn't have words like misogyny, patriarchy, things of that sort at the time, toxic masculinity. All we knew was they said that poetry became for girls and hip hop was for boys. So if you didn't want to fight every day, you instantly went from poetry to being a rapper. My little fat butt became a rapper, or wanted to be. Then I was very nervous because public speaking is the #1 fear in the world. So I became the DJ. My nickname back then was Easy E, way before Eric Wright ever became one. Rest in power to him. I did that until my mother beat me silly for breaking 2 or 3 of her stereos and destroying her needles and all her old albums. Then my DJ career came to an abrupt end. So that was that. Then you move on through life. I went to the Navy. Unlike these two, they went green, I went blue. So I went to the Navy. I was signed in at the age of 16. My mother had to sign me in. I was so young. So she actually co-signed. She signed me in. Did 8 years of that, on and off. Yeah, and then bounced around the country for a bit as an individual, just living life. I came into poetry very late in the game. These other 2 panel members were smart and did it early. I was very late getting into it. I was getting over a breakup. I couldn't afford therapy. So I decided I would make everybody feel as depressed as I did by reading a poem at a local open mic. That turned into going back the next week, the next week, and the next week. And while I still definitely have a spiritual belief system, it became my church. It became my every week I show up. It became the first place that as a Black man, I experienced a community of positive Black people. And we had elders and wise men and shaman and everybody spoke and hugged. And I did not grow up in that environment. My environment was drugs and fights and gangs. So to be in an environment where everybody greets you with a handshake or a hug and smiles and how are you, and they actually want to know how you're doing, all those things was mind blowing to me at the time. And to receive it so late in life, I already had a child myself by this time. I did the poetry thing. They started having poetry contests. We had never heard of Poetry Slam. We didn't think it was real. We thought the person who ran our coffee house created a poetry contest because he said it one day. We found out about Poetry Slam and did it. I was horrible at it, horrible. Lost for a year straight. I literally couldn't buy a win. And I might have bribed somebody at one point in time, and I still couldn't win. Then I won one, and it kind of steamrolled from there. National competitions, regional competitions, regional wins, national wins, world level wins. And then that turned into getting offers to do events and performing. Didn't know they paid you for them, found out they did. That turned into, we need to keep this job. So don't, all those people out there who wonder, can I be a business person and an artist? Yes, there's art even in business. Creative professional is a very broad term these days. But I was working at a First USA for credit card options, which now is Chase, was Bank One at the time. And I was doing that and touring. And it became to when I had to pick one. So I picked touring because you always can come back and get a job. If my passion had been banking, I'd have stayed in it. But my passion was to pursue this thing. I continued doing that. I toured, and I haven't really looked back since then. It's been about 15 years since I clocked in for somebody else at this point that wasn't myself. It's been a hell of a ride. It's got me here with you guys today with UNA, with Dr. Brown and Vanessa and everyone else that's here. So I don't regret it 1 minute. I consider myself now to be a creative professional. I've put in my 10,000 hours, my 20,000 hours. So when in terms of poetry, I'm definitely a creative professional for that, or a expert in that category in terms of discussing it, not in terms of writing it. We're never experts in writing it. So any questions involving writing poetry, guys, ask Mr. West and Mr. Wolfe. I can help you. I'm still trying to figure it out myself. They both write poems that blow my mind. So until I get to their level, we got work to do. But those would be the primary things as far as my story, who I am in terms of the internal things that they shared a little more tender moments. I grew up in a single parent household, the only child of an only child. I do not know my father's side of the family at all. I don't know him at all. We've spoken twice in 30 years, but he is on my Facebook page. So there's that. He just chooses not to speak. I have one son. I moved to LA to pursue my career in the film industry and TV industry a couple years ago, just before COVID, because who knew that was going to happen? I deal with imposter syndrome myself with all my accomplishments. I still feel like every room I walk into, someone's going to tell me that I've been exposed for being a fraud and I should leave. So I'm always waiting for that day to come. And it still hasn't come yet. So I keep walking in the rooms until they tell me I don't belong. But once I get in there, it's too late. Is my attitude now. You shouldn't have let me in. My goal as an artist is to take the doors off of every space I enter. Sometimes literally, but always metaphorically, to take the doors off every space I enter. I want as many of me's in those spaces as possible to reclaim them. I think that's one of the biggest things here we can discuss as the BIPOC part of this conversation, is that the two individuals that have been speaking so far have made a tremendously wonderful habit of spoiling and ruining spaces they walked into by their mere presence. And I say spoiling and ruining in a good sense, in terms of if you thought you were going to use bigotry or racism or any other ism, sexism, etc., as a way to get them out of the room, their process has forced you to accept them as being a valid individual in that space. And I enjoy having people like that in my circle that ruin spaces for those who would try to keep us out. All art is politics, though not all politics is art. But as a Black person, pretty much by default, unfortunately, everything we do is political, has a political edge to it. And that edge oftentimes isn't always us with a rallying cry, a fist glove in the air. It's us doing things like this in this space so that someone else will see this recording and might do something as simple as just decide to attend University of North Alabama, where that particular Black child may have thought they couldn't go to school without a particular start off or beginning. So those are the things that we look at as being key, that they will see us, that a Black teenage girl who has a child who may be shamed even by her own family would see Miss Wolfe with 2 children, one of them a historical cancer survivor, and see how she's thriving in a rural city, instead of letting the city be small dictate how much space she takes up on this planet. She in turn has forced the city to adjust to what she does. Mr. West, with his background in LA and coming from those neighborhoods and those environments through the Army, which can be a great thing, but also sometimes people come out of the Army and have a hard time readjusting to life. And he's been able to be in charge of what he did in the Army, which he didn't discuss, but he ran things in his department in the Army and service. And then to come out also and be a wonderful father to a great young lady that he takes care of. And then in turn to prosper as an artist, to do what he said, to be a cishet male, Black male, going into spaces discussing sexual violence, harassment, etc., is extremely necessary, because we need that voice in those spaces. We need the voices of the person that we see as the potential oppressor must be present in the spaces to have some conversations in order for things to grow, right? We have to have those moments in those conversations. So I am very grateful for having both of them be part of this panel. I'm very grateful for UNA of inviting us to do this talk. I'm more excited now for the one on the 18th. So they'll let you know before we sign off for this one, because we shook the dust off for this one. But I believe we also have some questions. We are very close, should be almost right on time in terms of the panel portion of this for the Q&A part. So they're gonna be posting questions and someone else is gonna take over that part. But I want to make sure that I address and thank, on behalf of me moderating this panel, that I thank Mr. West and Ms. Wolfe for giving of their time, their art, and of themselves. And please have a ton of questions for them, bombard them with questions, because I want to steal all their knowledge and say that I came up with it. So thank you.
We would first like to thank you all so much for being here with us today and sharing your knowledge. And also to, I should have said this in the beginning, but I think that Mr. Mabry know this, that we try to act in an uninhibited environment and that we do want the truth. And we look forward to what's going to happen on Thursday as well. So everyone, if you are on the Zoom right now and you want to ask questions, please use the Q&A function and go ahead and type those in. While we're waiting for some of those to filter in, please remember that if there's something that you want to know from one of the panelists and you may not be able to ask the questions right now, email us in the School of the Arts at arts@una.edu. And we will be sure to get those questions to our panelists. Remember, that's arts@una.edu. And Ms. Borelli Vega or Ms. Collier in our office will be able to get those to you. Well, I was going to have a couple kickoff questions, but because I was, want to be selfish and take all the time, but I'm going to go ahead and ask one right now that we have from Professor Keely Sheridan, who is in our Cinematic Arts and Theater Department. And she says, can you talk more about taking doors off of artistic spaces? I love this image. How can we as artist educators help take off doors, open windows, take down walls, etc.?
Yeah, I'll start that off, but I also invite Ms. Wolfe and Mr. West to also, because I'm sure they've had to do this or they've done it as well, but I can start that off. In terms of the how, well, the internal to external is different. Externally, as artists coming into spaces, then it's a matter of, once we are invited into those spaces, as my mother would say, act like you've been somewhere before, right? So you carry yourself in a manner that's conducive to the space, while also remaining yourself and making sure that you give them you. So it's almost kind of a being you on purpose. Not being ashamed of being in a space, making sure that you network while you're within that space, make sure that you speak to others while you're in that space, make sure that you're making it clear that you're not a unicorn. We are all precious and delicate and all these wonderful things. We are not unicorns. So if you can book me to do something, then I know 4 more of me if I'm busy. Where oftentimes in those spaces, the way the doors stay on is, well, Mr. West is busy, so we just won't do this thing at all. Now we won't invite him. We won't have this event. We won't have this conversation. So the way the doors get taken off is understanding that we are not a monolithic structure. If I'm not available, Mr. West is. If Mr. West is not available, Ms. Wolfe is. Dr. Brown is. There's a ton of people that are available for the thing you need. And also more so to get beyond the idea of it must be a Black thing to incorporate Black people. That happens all the time in college tours. A lot of us would joke that every February makes up 80% of our yearly income if you tour colleges and corporate gigs. 80% of our income we can make in February. And when I was younger, that was great. You mean to tell me in 28 days, I can make 10 months worth of my income I need and take the rest of the year off? That's what you think. It's not what happens. The other idea means, oh, that means you only care about what I have to say for 28 days out of the year. I'm only valid when you want to usher me out for 28 days out of the year. No. I'm valid. My voice is valid. My view, perspective, and stories are valid all year, because there's nothing in America more American than a Black person. So therefore, my stories are valid all the time. Internally, to take those doors off, I think I understand both sides of the question. Internally would be just that, to make a conscious effort to think, how can I include a particular group of people in a thing? And it doesn't necessarily mean we get caught up in the idea of, if it's theater, I need to cast more Black actors in non-Black roles. No, just invite people that you feel are qualified. Just say this is open and then see who shows up. Let those communities know that you want them to be engaged, to be part of it. It might be more of an audience thing. It could be working on the set design, behind the scenes, stories, plays you wouldn't have considered. So it's not just a matter of, well, let's get more Black people to play on the team. It's, no, let's invite them to the board meeting. Let's see, are you interested in being a coach? Are you interested in being an owner? Are you interested in any of the positions we have in the office? And letting them know, like, we're opening the doors. I believe that if you open the doors, we'll show up and take the door off. One of us eventually will come take that door off. It's just a matter of opening the doors and saying, hey, we're open for all things. I noticed that recently, and then I'll shut up with, I think Warner Brothers has a writing fellowship, and they changed it and said, we're opening it not just for Warner Brothers, we've opened it for every one of our networks. We're encouraging, and that was a way of doing it. We're encouraging diversity across the board. So not just, hey, we have a Black fellowship with HBO. They said, no, it's not Warner Brothers. So when you apply, your applications are being looked at by every single network we own across the board, because we all need to be more inclusive and diverse, and not just because we want to have a token, but because we realize those voices matter. So that's my answer to it. And I'll turn over to Mr. West and Ms. Wolfe.
Ms. Wolfe, would you like to go first? Or you want me to proceed?
Okay. Yes, sir. I'll go first. I'll definitely go first. Okay. So taking the artistic hinges off, taking the doors off the hinges. Well, for me, it just means being unapologetically you in every space that you enter. For me, being here in Lower South Carolina, in a rural area and in a space that is not, it's not inclined to the artistic abilities or anyone looking like me doing graphic design or bringing poetry to the forefront or to the masses or to the area at all. It's being unapologetically you and walking in spaces where people don't expect you to say just what they know, say what they're thinking, and doing it with grace and style and class. You know what I mean? There's there's a way. There's a way to present yourself and to say what you need to say, and still be you, if that makes sense. So for me, blowing the doors off the hinges in an artistic way means walking into that space and being unapologetically me, with style, grace, class, and my head held high. Now, Mr. West.
Appreciate that. Two things, and excuse me if I'm talking fast, I'm doing it for the sake of time. But one, I think the adoption of emotion is very, very, very important. We are emotionally driven people. If you are, as a professor, if you're standing in front of a class and you say, hey, look at the information on the board, you may see a certain amount of response to that information. But if you then say this information is testable, you're going to notice the response is going to enhance significantly. Now they're writing it down, they're taking pictures of it. If it's verbal, they're recording it because you said the word test. The word test is a significant emotional event. So sometimes the data isn't enough. We have to figure out how to attach emotion to that data in order for it to be a call to action. Like, for instance, I'm a junk food fanatic. You give me anything sweet, I'll devour it. So I can read the nutritional facts on a candy bar and it can tell me this candy is going to kill you. And I'll eat it while I'm reading nutritional facts. But if I go to the doctor and I'm diagnosed with diabetes and my life is threatened, instantly I'll change my diet because that information has pricked me emotionally. The data wasn't enough. I needed somebody to attach emotion to that data in order for me to start to act. Relationships, we do it all the time. We're always in search of love. So we meet somebody, we see all these red flags, and we turn the red flags into purple hearts because we want the relationship. So we deny those things. And then later on in life, those red flags show themselves. And now we're emotionally affected. Now we're trying to get out of the relationship. We had the data in the beginning, but now the emotion has become a call for action. So as an educator, I think it's very important to figure out a way to attach some type of emotion to that data. Those two things paired becomes a call of action. And the second thing is to piggyback off of what Ed was talking about, when February being the most popular month for Blacks to make money, I think it's very important to not always lean to the expected voice, right? A lot of times as children, we expect our parents to say certain things. So when they say it, one ear out the other, one ear out the other. But if we hear that same information from a friend, now we tend to take heed to it. So if you got a room full of people and you gave them a box of crayons, you said, somebody's coming to talk about Black History Month, draw the complexion of the person who you think it is. They all gonna pull out the black crayon because that's what they expect to hear it from. If it's a Black rights rally and I'm there for selfish reasons. I'm there because I'm Black. But if I look to my side and I see another ethnicity standing there with me, it's twice as powerful because now we got a person who don't have to be there, who's now rooting for a person who is Black. So now if you start bringing other ethnicities in through February to not tell a Black story, but to tell why they think the Black story is important, it may be received different. So sometimes you have to take the message out of the expected voice and give it to the voice that's not expected to be received from. I hope that makes sense.
Completely. You all, I think I'm enjoying this Q&A portion, and I think I think on Thursday we're gonna have to reconsider the time limit for that because I think we're getting some really valuable information. While we're waiting for another question to come in, I do have something that I do want to ask specifically to Ms. Wolfe. I was raised by my mom. I see a good mother every day in my wife, and I see what she does for our child, and I see him as a young boy of color to continue to grow and to progress. Not mess him up today. But you said something that was very important, that you said earlier, that the Black woman is an art within herself. The Black woman is an art within herself. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, when I say that the Black woman is an art within herself, I mean, historically, when you look back to the foundations of how this world was created, there are different versions of the truth, as we all know. But many will tell you that the Black woman is, in essence, everyone has a melanin gene, and the Black woman is the only only thing that gives birth to everything else. So to say that the Black woman is an art within herself is to say that out of this darkness, out of this Black canvas, everything else comes. Everything else is born. You look at the civil rights movement, a lot of people think that the man, Martin Luther King, was the spearhead of that, but it was really a woman that was the catalyst. You look at things like the Black church and how the Black woman is the most, she makes up the denomination. Without the Black woman, there is no church. Without the Black woman, you have no gospel. Without the Black woman, you have no soul. You have no R&B. You have no hip hop. You have no fight. You have no life, because the Black woman is what gives life to everything. So when I say that the Black woman is art, I mean that she is the paintbrush and the palette that everything else comes from. So I think that with everything that has gone on in America, one of the cries that we hear the loudest is that of the Black mother. And it hurts in a way, it hurts everyone who hears it, because we know that that is the cry of a mother of a nation, of a whole, of humanity. Does that make sense? So when I say that the Black woman is art, I literally mean she is the paintbrush and the palette and the foundation for which everything else comes. When you watch her walk, when you watch her move, when you watch her talk, when she does that little it's art. Everything we do is melodic. Everything we do is, I'm sorry, I might be a little biased, but we're a little amazing.
I don't think you can learn if you don't walk in the shoes, and no one can tell the story of someone who walks in the shoes. So no, I don't think you're biased at all. I think it's an issue of telling the truth so we all learn. That's what we're here for. So
exactly.
I do have some very specific questions for each of you.
Okay.
Mr. Miss, I think you talked a little bit earlier about learning from, like, if I got hit by a car and I know that, like, okay, I got hit by that car, so I'm not going to do this the same way so I can avoid that accident. How many times in our country will we continue to be hit by cars before we wake up and realize that we have to change the route of the street, or we have to change the way this traffic signal turns? And how do you think us as artists can help promote that change so we can divert that street to another direction? Real deep question. No, we have very limited time, but do what you think you feel like you.
Yeah,
you may want to chime in as well. I think this is just, it's selfish for me to put it at one person, but
yeah, I made some listen for a friend on this one. But to address your question, I think that's two-parted, right? Whenever you stand in front of that crosswalk and the light is green for you, you're doing everything right, but you still get smashed by that vehicle, right? Sometimes you realize the only way to your destination is to cross that street. So now you can't avoid that street until you develop the resources to potentially build a bridge. And now once you develop the resources to build a bridge, now you can avoid those streets. But in order to develop those resources, it's collective effort. So now I got to grab the other people who are like me, and maybe we hinge at the fingers and we have a collective effort to now build us another route so we don't have to worry about being hit by drivers who aren't paying attention. You know what I mean? So I think it's two-parted. One, once you realize that there's no other way, then you have to figure out how to safely cross that street. But then once you obtain the resources to build another route, you got to link up with the like-minded people, pull them in, and collectively build that alternate route. So now the street isn't your only option. And then once we build that route, and that route is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's been created by us. It's controlled by us. It's something that we own. So now it's something we don't have to worry about a lack of safety, because it's all of us on it, right? And then we're only opening it up to people who are not people who are our color, but people who are minded in the way we are. That people are people and not people are colors. You know what I mean? So I hope I addressed your question.
Yeah, I think that ties directly into what we're talking about. Mr. Mabry, I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna be quiet.
That's a hell of a question. I like Mr. West's answer. And I just realized how I was raised, because when I heard it, I immediately went the other direction, and I know what my problem in life is. The bridge is a great. The bridge to me thinks of Garveyism, right? So the concept of, okay, well, if it's the traffic is dangerous here, then let's go here, which is the path of least resistance, and that's a very good way to go about it. I'm very much, I'm trying to think of the nice way to say this. I'm very much of a, well, if I walk into that street and I run the risk of getting hit, what happens if me and Obbie both cross at the same time? Well, that's just two people hit. What if me, Obbie, and Miss Wolfe? Me, Obbie, Miss Wolfe, and Dr. Brown, and Vanessa, and everyone on the attendees, and everyone on the panel. What if 100 of us? What if 500 of us all cross through at the same time? Now, in turn, granted, cars are going to hit some people once, and then we're going to have what's called a traffic jam. And then in turn, every one of those cars that wants to know what's going on, what is the holdup, why do we have this 20-car pileup, is going to get out their car and look and see what happened. What's going on in front of you? I can't see what's in front of you. I can't see what's going on. Oh, well, there's a bunch of black people in the street, and we hit the first wave, and then that was it. And now the other waves are standing there, and they're not crossing the street. Or if they are, there's so many of them that it's become a continuous wave of them. And we'll get through. We can't get through. Well, now it's walking also, we can't continue how we're going because, there's cars there. And what happens is you have what's called a forced conversation. So now this road isn't big enough for the both of us to handle things the way we're doing it. So there's nothing wrong with the road. There's something wrong with the passengers that are taking the journeys. The road is a road, but it's how people are choosing to respect that road, how they're claiming I have sovereign domain on this road over someone else. They're not respecting the rules of the light, right? So if to use Mr. West's case, if the light is the Constitution, if the light is the Bill of Rights, if the light is civil rights action, if the rights Emancipation Proclamation, if the rights are all those things, if the light is all those things, then respect that light all the time. So when we cross, you should respect that light. There should be no reason for me to get hit if I'm operating underneath the same light as you. That's just, again, it's an extremism. I understand I'm extending the hell out of that metaphor, but I like the idea of how does that get handled through that conversation. I rather have it in this panel. I rather have it in these discussions, but if it need be forced, then let it be forced. To tie in that, and I'll shut up with what you asked to Ms. Wolfe. It's a great question about black. I wrote that quote down too. The black woman is an art form in herself. Stealing it, cash app you $1. I'm saying it somewhere. Try to impress some young lady or something. I don't know. It's a wonderful quote, but it ties into that. We're just a year removed, and this is me speaking as me, not me speaking on behalf of you and the other panel. Keep in mind, please, anyone watching this later. We're at the year anniversary of the assassination of Breonna Taylor. So when we discuss a black woman who never got the blessing to become a black mother, that was robbed of her to have that opportunity, who, like Miss Wolfe in the Army, was a medic. This young lady worked in the medical field, so her job was to help other people get better. Her job was to help other people get out of emergency-based situations, and in turn was assassinated. She was under the lights, right? If the pathway in this case is her apartment building, right? The people traveling on that pathway were police officers. And then there were two people laying down almost asleep in a bed. They were simply at that crosswalk. The light that should have been the law to protect them was not respected because of the color of their skin. So there was nothing wrong with the pathway. There was nothing wrong with the journeyman on it. There was nothing wrong with the police being at her door, technically. Nothing wrong with that. There was nothing wrong with them being in that bed. There was nothing wrong with her boyfriend having concealed carry permit and having a gun in that house. There was nothing wrong with any of the people in any of the place they were. The problem was they did not respect the traffic light that dictates how they come and go. So then we end up having a situation where the wall that the officer shot at and the neighbors where the bullets almost went through, the wall got more rights and got more respect and got more jurisdictional presence than the slain body. Because the only citations given were given for the wall that was shot, not the body. So that's how I see it in terms of that metaphor. I see it from that perspective of, we get it by having this conversation and going, it is time to acknowledge that harm against one of us is harm against all of us. We do not historically lessen your property value if we are people. We don't lower property value. We don't lower the quality of your store. The color doesn't wash or rinse off, as has been proven at our expense at scientific experiments. So nothing about us takes away from your lifestyle. Not a single thing. And apparently, according to the clothes you wear, according to the music, according to Beyonce's 28 Grammys breaking history, according to Serena being the most powerful single individual athlete in the history of professional athleticism, beating out another Black person known as Jesse Owens from back in the day, according to your fashion, your design, your TV shows, your acting, according to every field, your Super Bowls, your LeBron Jameses, your Michael Jordans, according to everything that you enjoy extracurricular activities in, we actually increase the quality of your life as long as we are entertaining you.
Ooh.
So then why can't that work in your bank? Why is that not working at your real estate department? So, and I'll show up, but that's, so for me, it's let's have this conversation by choice. But if not, then let's have it. And force doesn't mean, I'm not saying the old AK by the door. I'm saying force in terms of what Obbie's saying. The bridge is cool, but for every one of us going over the bridge, some of us are gonna go, no, I'm still crossing the street. You know, my daddy made this street. Or if we keep it real, a Black person created the traffic light. So yeah, one of my ancestors might have created this traffic light. It is my right to cross this street. It is your right to not hit me, right? Like, you should not hit me. One of those amendments or bills says you don't hit me. So, and that's where I think the conversation needs to go to of that discussion. Like Obbie said, bringing those other people into space for Black History Month, when you bring those conversations, because racism is not a Black problem, it's a Black pandemic, but it is not a Black problem. It is a white on white problem that we just saw from the Capitol riots. We just saw in the past election. We just saw recently how racism is definitely a white problem. You know, the moment Black Lives Matter gets compared to Antifa, when QAnon is allowed to walk through Capitol buildings and murder policemen, because one just died yesterday, they confirmed he's dead, and they got arrested for assault on the anniversary of Breonna Taylor's murder. So yeah, the conversation that needs to happen, it needs to be all of us in that room, you know, having it.
We'll let Mr. West chime in. We have about 7 minutes. I do have a question, a homework assignment for all of you before we go to Mr. West here. And how I'd like to handle this homework assignment is that we can't answer it right now, but I would like for you all to maybe take a quick video of you answering it and send it to us. And we're going to do it that way. The question is, we mentioned about lowering property values. Do you think that our local or our regional or national playhouses think that Black artists tend to lower property values or the value of what they put out in their products? And if so, how do those individuals who are actively working on the other side of the coin, being BIPOC or not, counteract that issue or that problem and become an advocate for BIPOC artists? That's your homework. But Mr. West, you have something to say on this last question.
Yeah, and this won't take but 2 minutes. I absolutely love, Ed got me questioning my bridge, right? So I absolutely love his response. I would love to also consider if we can add a few more pedestrians, right? If we add some pedestrians whose ethnicity is consistent with the drivers, are those drivers more likely to stop? So where are those pedestrians? If they cross the road with us, those people who are the same color as those drivers, if they're in the street with us, are those drivers more likely to stop? I think so. So those are the individuals we need to find to cross the street with us. We have a lot of people who agree with our mindset, but who won't speak it out because they're afraid they may be ostracized by somebody who don't. So we need that level of intestinal fortitude as well to cross this street.
All right. I think that, you know, I don't think that we had enough time. I just don't think we had enough time. But the good thing about it is that we get to carry on Thursday, and also beyond Thursday, Ms. Borelli Vega and the SOTA team are going to put out some more information on how we can all come together in person to carry on this discussion in September, what we're planning on right now, pending COVID, of course, and we'll figure out a way to make that work. But I want to thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for taking your time and your honesty, and also telling us what the new creative professional looks like, and also how we can take that concept and push it forward so we also can teach our students on how to be creative professionals, and also how they can be advocates of individuals from different cultural backgrounds or socioeconomic backgrounds, and move forward. Your homework assignments, if you can send it to me at tbrown5@una.edu, or you can send it to arts@una, whatever you want to do. And we will get that out to everyone, hopefully tomorrow, pending tornadoes. If you're huddled in a basement somewhere, look at the video. It'll give you some courage to move on. So thank you all. We look forward to seeing you on Thursday, and hope you have a good night.
Thank you.